Hi, my name is Ryan Pack.
And I'm Nicole Barlow.
And this is Soundtrack Your Life, where we speak with a guest about a soundtrack that is important to them. Returning to the podcast is Jim from Film Rage. Jim has been on previous episodes about David Byrne's True Stories and Emerald Fennell's Saltburn. Welcome back, Jim.
Hey, how's my two favorite music peeps?
Jim, I'm so happy to have you back. And I just want you to know that sometimes when I have just a moment to myself, I'll think about all those slurping noises that we made during the Saltburn episode. Sometimes I just think it just pops into my head. So I'm so glad you're here.
Oh, you know what? I thought you were going to break into song there because I thought you were going to say, sometimes when we touch, the honesty's too much.
You know what? I'm so glad I didn't because that was so much better.
Bravo, Jim.
Bravo.
My finger's touching the screen right now. Just people might not be able to see that. Well, there we go.
I'm so glad I'm mad we're talking about a score now because I can't get you to sing something lyrical.
Yeah, this score, man. I can't wait to talk about this score. I cannot wait.
Ooh. Well, let's wait a second and have you remind our listeners about Film Rage.
Well, Film Rage is you know what? I've been trying to find a better way to explain our podcast because, ultimately what we do is we go see new release movies now in cinema, and then we want to talk about it. We kind of want to be an updated, angrier Siskel and Ebert. But I think, and maybe Ryan, you can agree or disagree with me on this one. I like to think that we've become a movie variety show because we don't just do one thing. We do go see the movies and we talk about it, but then we like to talk about other things within it. So we have a multitude of segments that don't last too long. We're usually about an hour long. So, if you get tired of us, and this is the thing I like to brag about the most. We actually timestamp everything. So if you want to go look at our stuff and then go, this all looks horrible, but this looks interesting, you can just go right to what it is. So we kind of pre-warn people, if you don't want to see this, don't go there. And if you do, then this is where you go find it.
Yeah, and the timestamps are useful because if there's a movie that you want to see, but you don't want to hear the review from, you can kind of skip that movie and then you can hear the other reviews.
Yeah, for sure. And, we try not to do too many spoilers, but, sometimes we can't help it because if a movie's so horrible, I kind of want to spoil it just for the simple fact that I just don't want someone to see it. Like, I really don't. I kind of feel if you've made such a bad movie, then it's okay that I spoil your movie. And I find it funny now when people talk about movies like, for example, like M. Night Shyamalan's. My brain is fried because I'm just getting over a cold. What's that?
Trap?
No, not that one. That's a whole other story. No, his first one where I see dead people. Like
Sixth Sense.
Sixth Sense.
Yeah, thank you. So if you don't know how Sixth Sense ends now, I love it when I listen to a podcast talk about it and they'll be like, I don't know if we should put any spoilers in here. I'm like, dude, if you haven't seen Sixth Sense by now, this is not going to spoil it for you. Like, everybody knows.
That's very much on you.
Yeah, it's on you.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel that way after 2 weeks because I don't think that watching things on TVs at home is watching a movie or watching a TV. So, I'm just biased because I think everybody should go to the cinemas and they'd all be able to survive. So,
speaking of the cinema, we're going to talk about a movie that came out this year and that you can probably still see in the cinema. In kind of a switch up, Jim didn't pick the movie that we're going to be talking about today. A24 actually asked us to cover the soundtrack. They're not paying us, so all of our opinions today are our opinions.
We are not on the A24 payroll, despite me wearing an A24 shirt today. I bought this with my own hard-earned money, A24.
Yeah, all we got was a link to the score of this movie before it was digitally released, which I think was October 18th. and we got tickets to watch the movie, and that's all we got. So today we are going to talk about the A24 film We Live in Time. It is John Crowley's 2024 film. The soundtrack is the soundtrack that you can listen to on streaming right now is the score by Bryce Dessner. This is his second A24 score of this year. He also did Sing Sing,
which is also brilliant.
He's also worked on The Revenant. He did additional music for, which I never quite understand what that means when it's a score. Like, you're not the score, you did additional music, but you're...
Yeah, are you a score doctor? I didn't understand that either, but regardless.
But he's only worked on bangers, so he did The Revenant. Him and his brother scored Come On, Come On. Him and his brother and his bandmate Matt Berninger did music for Cyrano. And him and his brother also did Two Popes, which was an HBO series. So, if Bryce Dessner's name is familiar to you and you don't know any of those movies, it's probably because he's in The National. So he plays guitar, and him and his twin brother Aaron write all the music for The National. And his brother also produced Taylor Swift's Folklore, and Bryce did the string arrangements for that. So he's done a lot. I don't know which one to call his day job at this point.
He's a classical composer. You know, he is obviously very prolific, but I think in maybe a more quiet way, because not all of these films are blockbusters. They're instead sort of indies, much like what he pursues musically with The National. And I think he's also kind of part of this. We've talked to, I think, a lot of composers on the show, and there's discussion around this trend of using rock artists, rock musicians, as composers in films. There's Johnny Greenwood from Radiohead. There's Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross from Nine Inch Nails. And so there's an interesting thing that happens where you have a score that's also heavily influenced, I think, by, pop music. It's not a super traditional score.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm not sure. Nicole is frozen in time. We're living in time right now with Nicole being frozen.
I see you non-frozen.
You see Nicole non-frozen?
No, now she's gone.
Now she's back. Oh, now she's muted.
Sometimes if you turn your camera off and then you turn your camera on, it helps.
Oh.
That's what I did. Oh. Big time IT tip, right, Ryan?
I don't know if I can vouch for that.
Turning it on and off again. Anyway, I'm glad I'm unfrozen. Continue, Jim.
I completely agree. This is an unusual score, for sure. Especially in the I want to say the construction of the instrumentation, because there's instruments in here that like you might get from classical sort of compositions, but how it's done within this almost like modern sort of adult contemporary music stylings, and having these sort of instruments in there like flute and oboe and just how they accent the effects of it. And, if we were doing one of those things where we were watching it and doing a listening party and watching and seeing the accentation of the actual instrumentation, I imagine it was emphasizing huge points in the movie, because when you listen to the score just by itself, and this is a score like I could listen to this every day on my way to work. I felt like when I was driving around in a snowstorm yesterday, I had it on and it brought me calmness, but at times when it needed to emphasize something, it was like, I was okay. It was like,
the accenting, as you said, is so gorgeous and so affecting and so effective in the film. When we were walking out of the screening, Ryan said something that I feel like is really true. And he's like, this is the best National album that doesn't exist.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think if you are a fan of the band and you are curious about Bryce's composition work, I think this is a great gateway into that. You know, I had a couple weeks with the soundtrack before the movie came out, and it, you know, like you said, Jim, it's super listenable. And then when I got to watch how the music shows up in the film and how it accents certain things and how it works around like even comedic beats, like it was really cool to see.
I found like I'm not sure if you are both into this band or not, but when they came out, I'm OG, as you guys know, Penguin Cafe Orchestra. I'm not sure if you ever listened to any of their stuff, but listening to this score, there's elements that I felt was influenced by some of the Penguin Cafe Orchestra stuff. So if you don't know this band, I highly suggest both of you listen to it, because when you do, hopefully you'll see the same thing as me. It's like funny because if you don't know the band, you're like, okay, I don't know what he's talking about, but I'd love it for us to get back and just communicate back with me on socials, just say, okay, I picked up a couple of, like, just listen to their iTunes greatest or something like that. So it gives you a real breadth of what they do. And it's all really cool orchestration type stuff, kind of like, not really Baroque, but more like chamber music done pop style. And it's just the accents and the flow of the music is just so quirky and poppy, and it's just so listenable. And that's what I got from this too, right? Is just like, I love it when you do that though. You're in the movie even, and you're listening to and you're like, there's nothing that could fit in this scene better than what I'm listening to right now. And it's like, it brings the tone of the movie from the music that you're listening to. And you say like, I can't replace this in my mind because this is what I'm seeing has like, it's got to be the complete package. And that's why I think it's so important if people have budget when they're making a, you know, I mean, it's A24, so they I don't know how they make what they make for the prices that they make. They must just pay everybody scale, and then they basically say, if we make money, everybody makes money. Because I mean, who wouldn't want to work in an A24 project? They're literally the only house that, to me, no matter what they put out, it's going to be at least good.
A banger. Like, that's what I said to Ryan in the theater too, that A24 has such a strong reputation at this point. I think these have to be the most desirable projects in Hollywood to be associated with, because they are doing things that feel brave and bold and interesting. And even when they kind of fail or they're a little bit clunky, I would so much rather watch an A24 failure than a big blockbuster success, because their films are just so interesting. And I think We Live in Time is no exception. And the score is really such a great compliment to that. I think this is where we also say that if you haven't seen the film, we're going to have to give some mild spoilers, I think, at the very least, in order to talk about just, you know, kind of the atmosphere and the storyline. It's a sad film in a lot of ways, but it's also very life affirming, which is
and
something
also
that,
really funny.
and funny. Like, it has, I was shocked because I went in being like, I know it's a tearjerker. Everybody knows that. That's all the, you know, the press and sort of the like early reviews of it were like, you're going to cry. People are going to just openly weep in the theater. And that is true. It does have like some very emotional elements, but it's also fucking funny. It's got some jokes that like really land.
And the score really has to work around all of it. I won't say it's tonally all over the place, but it's not exactly a cookie cutter tearjerker. It's not a romantic comedy, but it is funny. It's a romantic drama, but it's not like super tense all the time. Like, it kind of doesn't fit neatly in a box.
Yeah, it's unconventional. So that's the best way I feel like you can describe it. It's very A24 in that way, that you're not getting a straight up and down love story. You're not getting anything Hallmark. It is very unconventional and also very lived in and real. I don't remember the last time I watched a film with two leads having the kind of chemistry that Andrew Garfield and Florence Pugh have. I think is very difficult to achieve. And they just get it, and you believe them as a couple who is like complicated and messy, but also like truly in love.
Yeah, I totally agree. I was gonna say I'm gonna, like, I am one of those people that I basically will finalize my rating based on whether or not I cry. If a movie is supposed to make me cry, here's the thing I find about this movie. It did not make me cry. And
Yeah.
that actually surprised me, because when I was watching it and I saw the trailers, and trust me, because we at the cinema every week, I've seen this trailer a lot of times because it was playing in front of a lot of movies for a lot of time.
Heavy
And I was
promotion.
like, yeah, exactly. It was heavily promoted. And when I went and saw it, I just couldn't believe that I loved this movie so much, but at the same time that I didn't cry. And I think that was what was so good about it, is that what the director did to bring us along in this story, and it wasn't a linear story until the end, right? Like it does go back and forth in time in different places until it gets to a certain point in time, and it's intentional from the director's chair why that is. But I think it's because we kind of knew at the very beginning, almost at the very beginning, what was happening, and
Mm-hmm.
and the journey wasn't so much around their love, but what the legacy that she could leave for the two people that she's going to leave behind, right?
Yeah. That's such a
So I
good
mean,
way to put it.
it's also
So true.
not, it's not a surprise. Like, if people are listening to this and they go, "Oh my God, you mean Florence Pugh dies?" It's in the trailer. You know she's gonna die. They tell you that in the trailer.
That's what I'm dancing around, right? Because I feel like that's a spoiler to say, like, yeah,
It's
she dies. She has cancer and
yeah.
dies. She shaved her head for this film. I feel like that's like, if you know one thing about this film, it's that she shaved her head in preparation for it and was like really committed to the role of like, no, I'm not going to fake this. I'm not going to wear a bald cap. Like, I'm
Yep.
doing it. So she had a bunch of red carpets where she was bald because of her commitment to this film. But yeah, like I think that's why it is not as sad as people maybe think it's going to be, because it's a little bit of a foregone conclusion. So you are more so living in these moments with them. And that's kind of what the score is supporting too, is this, you know, I think Andrew Garfield said it really well. So when we went to the Q&A after the screening, he comes out and he makes a crack of like, well, that was cheery, right? Because you have to do a Q&A after this like sort of tearjerker of a film. And he's like, actually, I hope you felt that it was life affirming. And I feel like it is. It's life affirming. And the score that accompanies it is also very that.
Yeah, not to get into too many spoilers, but I read an interview with John Crowley where he said we didn't shoot any scenes where like she's dying. There's no like deathbed scene.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not that we just cut it from the movie. Like, there just is no deathbed scene. Like, there's not that big emotional, like, you know, he's crying and holding her hand as she's leaving this earth, you know, like, that's
Yeah.
intentional. Because,
Yeah.
like, that's not the focus
that.
of the movie.
We've seen
Yeah.
that in a lot of movies about, you know, people dying of cancer or having a terminal disease. Like, we've seen that moment. And I feel like this approaches the same storytelling in a completely fresh way. It felt very fresh in that respect.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't even call this a rom-com. Like, it's definitely a romance film, but I don't think it's a rom-com, because when you attribute it to rom-com, rom-com has a model, which is you have an idiot that falls in love with an asshole, and it doesn't matter what sex that person is. It could, could be a bi asshole with a trans person that's an idiot, and then it doesn't matter who it is. Doesn't matter what the sex is. Doesn't matter what their orientation is. There's always an idiot and there's always an asshole, and then they end up getting together, and it makes no sense how they got together in the first place, and
Right.
the movie should never
What
exist.
changed? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas this one, it's just two regular people, and they end up falling in love in a very unnatural way, and then their love becomes so natural, and that we're just there for the journey of it, and all the way along as we go through it, we're basically, at least for me, because I've been in a very long time relationship, you can see those moments in time and because it is a very moment in time, we live in time. These are little tiny snippets of this film that are like, I remember in my life, like when I met my significant other, or I remember that in my life when this happened, or the challenges that they go through, or when we had a kid, or however that looks. And it helps you to really connect to these characters. And I think what makes this movie so great is these characters that you fall in love with. They're just normal. They're like you and I, just walking the street, and yet I feel so good about how much their love meant to them and to you watching it, right?
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely true. I think this also has like even though it's not a rom-com, it probably has like the best meet cute that I've seen in a minute. Not to spoil it, because I feel like that would be too far if you haven't seen the film, but the way that they meet is so well executed.
I think that's in the trailer too, though. So it's
Is
like
it
I
in the
don't think
trailer?
It is, yeah.
I think
Okay,
it's in the
in the
trailer too.
trailer.
Or
So
at least how he ends up at the hospital is in
Yes.
the
Okay,
trailer.
well, if you haven't seen the film, like turn it off. But when she hits him with the car and they end up across from each other and he's like with the neck brace, it's such a great moment.
and he's like, "Do I know you?"
And she's like, they needed the bed, so they just stuck you on a chair.
Right, right. And you find out that he's like in the midst of this divorce and finalizing his break with someone else. Then they have this, sort of truly, I'm meeting you at the worst point in my life, like moment, and none of this should work, but somehow it does.
And as far as being a romantic movie, I feel like the most romantic thing said in the film is when, she's talking about the different procedures she can have to treat her cancer. And she says, I could get them both my ovaries removed, and that would give me the best chance of surviving, but I would like to keep one just in case I would like to have kids with you.
Yeah.
And like and that's like not something you would hear in a romantic comedy. Like it's in a way an extremely romantic thing to say, but it's also like not fluffy enough for like a romantic comedy.
Yeah, like there's deep conversation that goes in this, right? And everybody that watches this movie, I don't think there's a person on the place there that hasn't been affected by cancer, right? In one way or another.
Yeah.
Like it either an immediate family member or a very close friend or whatever the case may be, right? And that journey that she takes is it's very shared with both of them, because a lot of times people think that, the person that's going through the journey of having cancer is the only one that's taking that journey. And so, she's that balancing act that they have to carry with each other and they share it together is very emotional journey. And yet, again, still, I didn't bawl my eyes out. I'm almost bawling my eyes out now talking about it because it's such a powerful film to me and in the moments in time that it is. But yeah, I agree. It's yeah, this is definitely not a rom-com, but there is funny parts in it and it's romance. So
yeah, and I think to balance out the fact that it is a sad movie and it is a bit of a tearjerker, but it's also like, not to be like facetious, but it's also like a very horny movie. Like they have a lot of like
they have a lot of sex.
Like it's not sad sex they're having. It's not like, oh, you're gonna die soon sex. It's like, oh, we're just like really horny for each other's sex.
Yeah.
Well,
which is refreshing to see in a movie that's going to be sad.
Refreshing to see, and it also I didn't even really take it as like it's maybe I taking it wrong, but like yes, it's like super horny sex, but it's also kind of like there's also that kind of like familiarity that I feel like they represented really well, that intimacy and closeness and things you only find with like a long-term romantic partner that I felt like were represented on screen in a way that you don't always see. Because it's not like, extraordinary like bed burning sex. It's like marriage, and partnership. And there's like a lot of discussion around like Gen Z doesn't like sex in movies. Like they don't want to see people naked. They don't want to like see a lot of the moments that like were in Oppenheimer, for example. So much discourse around how those moments felt unnecessary to certain folks or made them feel awkward. But I think sex on film is so important when it's done correctly.
Yeah, I would agree too.
It's a really good example of that for me. Like they felt meaningful scenes to me. Right. They were not throwaway.
Well, and I think you can't have a movie about two people in love, and it's about moments in time without having the sex part of it, right? Like you can't. It's like okay, we're there for the birth, we're there for a marriage, we're there for this, we're there for that. Well, every single one of those are going to be important moments in your time, right? Like it totally is.
Sex and love and death, they're all kind of interconnected ideas, and I feel like this movie confronts a lot of that in ways that are interesting and that are vital And you lose that when you're afraid to be as, I think, raw about it as this film is. So it was kind of cool to see, I felt. It was done, I don't even want to say it was done tastefully. I just feel like it was done in a way that was
Naturally.
believable.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
naturally and believable. All their scenes together are believable. Like, I'm not sure if you've both seen The Marriage Story, but I think in the last 10 years, if you want to see a movie about relationship
Yep.
that hits what relationships look like, The Marriage Story for me, with Adam and ScarJo, where it was like, that movie is so beautiful and well done. And then when you watch this one, to me, that was another example of, okay, people who are making this movie get what real relationships look like.
Hmm.
I actually felt like, and there's times when you see movies that the chemistry is so off and you're just like, these people don't love each other. Like, I'm not saying anything in this. I really bought that they were in love and that this was their relationship, 100%.
Oh, yeah. It was so believable and so honest. And there's just so much in it that you really feel like suspended with them in these moments. This is pretty cool. And I think to go back, to the score a little bit, I know Ryan and I have been longtime fans of the National and Bryce's work with the National. And I feel like a lot of what he does with that project, it's lyrically, right, and musically, there's a lot of emphasis on family relationships, on romantic connection, on things that are, oftentimes like difficult to put into words or put into art. It gave me like a very kind of like High Violet feeling. Like there was just a
Right.
very, like, like there are a lot of songs on that album felt very parallel to what's happening in this score and in this film.
Yeah, like the plot of this movie felt like it could be the basis of a National album.
Yes, totally. And so that's why I feel like your comment about like, oh, is this like the best National album that isn't really a National album? That's how I feel about the score.
How do you think it would? So here's a good question for you, using that as a reference then. How do you think it would affect either this movie or the feel of it if he took this score and then added the lyrics to it afterwards and then released it as an album? How do you think that, like, I really feel, and or even if he changed some of the instrumentation on it and made it more rock or did something to it, like, I always think about that for when you hear these type of scores that are just so good, and I think to myself, like, there could be some top 10 singles on this album.
Oh, yeah.
That's on a score, but no one's gonna, like, you're not gonna turn on the radio and hear this one of these songs on it.
But
And
like
number
first
10
of all,
is Weetabix by Bryce Dessner.
Yeah, I know.
Carousel. But first of all, don't threaten me with a good time, because if it's like actually like became, like a indie album, yeah, I'd be like totally down for that. And I think there's also, I have to wonder like how many of these compositions started in one place but found their way here. I think when you're this prolific as an artist, you always have like, for lack of a better term, like a junk drawer of like ideas and like
Or ideas that mutate and
yeah, you have things that like maybe didn't quite work for an album that are ideas that you bring to a different project. And it feels like that's something that might have been the case here. But we'll never know. Come on the show, Bryce.
Yeah, 100%. Come on the show.
But yeah, he was just still able to fit them around like different like beats and scenes, which was pretty great too.
It's pretty impressive. Yeah, it's impressive the way that a score that, again, is not like super traditional in the way that you would, find the same like peaks and valleys if you were different types of composer. It still really works against picture.
I feel sad because I didn't do enough prep because I don't know the National. I've never listened to them ever. So for me, this was a great surprise because guess what I'm doing this afternoon?
Well, if you like, if you like this score, I feel like there's kind of no way that you can't like, at least a lot of like maybe half of the National, because they have a lot of albums at this point, but you will find something to love in their catalog for sure.
Yeah, I will definitely be crushing it for sure.
I think you can really imagine just Matt Berninger's voice over a lot of the score. Not to say that like the score doesn't stand on its own. And it's interesting because I was listening to the Sing Sing score as well, just to kind of get a vibe between the projects, and it's a very different score. I think Sing Sing is much more in the background. Like I wouldn't know without, like I wouldn't be able to figure out as Bryce Dessner without knowing that beforehand.
That's interesting, right?
Where this one I was like, oh, this is definitely like, if not Bryce Dessner, someone who like really likes the National.
And I was wondering too, do you think it was like the director that approached him with this sort of, we like what you've created for the National, we're interested in bringing something similar to this? I think it makes the movie also feel more modern. To me, this feels, even though it's set in this kind of like British countryside that almost feels like idyllic and not real through a lot of it, at least to my like American sensibilities. I'm like, how is any of this real? Like, this is the most beautiful shit I've ever seen in my life. What is this farmer's market? Like, teleport me to this fucking farmer's market. But yeah, like I kind of wonder how that conversation went, if he was sought out specifically because of this more kind of like indie pop vibe and sound that he creates.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it. Like, although with A24 again, they just every single score they gets it's not a production house that puts on canned music, right? Like there's so many Hollywood. I'm such a Hollywood basher, but there's so much Hollywood crap that comes out and the music is all terrible. This was brought me back to the 80s almost, where I was like, this was almost like a John Hughes movie. It's how much I love this soundtrack. And that I could see them just actually hand-picking it. But it's funny how, like, just going back to what you said earlier, like when you hear Trent Reznor on a soundtrack, you know it's Trent Reznor, even though I've never, like, we've been in movies and we're just like, oh my God, Trent Reznor's on another soundtrack. Like, it's so obvious he's got a style. Even when he's changing that style, you know it's him. So for you to sort of say, Sing Sing is like so different than this, and it's the same composer, that's a testament. Like, it's Danny Elfman, right? Like, you can't not listen to a Danny Elfman soundtrack and not go, yeah, that's Danny Elfman, right? It's such stylistically what they do. So I think that's a testament to how talented he is.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think people will complain about, like, I sometimes not being able to clock that it's a certain person's score, but I am in your camp, Jim, where I feel like having a perspective and having a style that you bring to something is just an enhancement for that thing, and that you've been selected to bring that same mood and energy to life.
Yeah, I think a bigger question would have been, why did they pick him for Sing Sing? Right?
Yeah, who knows? You know what I will say, though? The A24 shop will probably be the death of you if it isn't already. But they do a really wonderful job with their vinyl. And you can tell that they do really care about curating music. So it's not an afterthought by any means.
Oh, and the vinyl for this soundtrack is coming out at the end of December.
Oh, I thought I saw
you can
it on
pre-order
their
it now, but it's coming out.
Yeah, funny how that is. Just one of those little pieces of information. So during the strike, the film strike back in the day, A24 was the only one that was really allowed to continue to work, because their contracts for who they pay and how they pay and what they do is legit, and they don't try and fuck over the artists. They don't try to fuck over everybody. They just say, we want to make the best projects with the best people, and we want to make sure everybody makes money on this and continue to thrive. So, I kind of just wish all the other ones would disappear and all we had was A24, but that then I get a different A24 movie every week. That would be just the best.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because, like, I was looking at the credits of the soundtrack, and he recorded it in London. But I was like, oh, did he get other band members to play on the soundtrack? Because I think especially Carousel, the big montage near the end of the movie, which has the infamous Carousel horse. It sounds like a National song, like a full band.
Yeah.
But like you can tell like the drummer is not the drummer from the National, but I was like, ooh, did he get his brother or did he get, his bandmates on it? And it's not, but that's probably the closest track to sounding like the National, like you would hear. The other songs have a lot of like woodwinds and horns and stuff like that. Not that the National doesn't incorporate that stuff, but obviously it's not on the forefront. But I remember like listening to that one specifically, and I could hear his guitar, like his guitar tone,
Hmm.
and like the little things that he does a lot in the songs of the National. It's like, there's Bryce's guitar.
Yeah, it's definitely a tone thing, right? That you're just like, oh, I recognize this. It's familiar and warm, and there's something that feels like nice about that. It's very like lived in, despite being like well instrumented. It's terribly phrased, but I also really like how when I was looking at the record and I was looking at the track listing, like all the tracks on this have very like ordinary names.
Right.
New
You know
New
what I
Year's
mean? Like
Baby.
literally the tracks are Car Park, Weetabix,
Yeah.
Meal for One,
My
Bath
favorite
Time
is
Sausage Cakes. And obviously, like if you've seen the movie, these are all like beats in the film.
Bouncing Ball.
yeah,
Yeah, they're all like beats in the story. And so it's sort of like an inside joke if you've seen it and you understand it and you know where these things fit in the puzzle. But I find that really funny because I think it also kind of speaks to how this movie is just kind of revolves around ordinary and unextraordinary moments.
I think it also helps you again because we both saw this movie a while ago and now talking about it, and you know what I have to not tell a lie because if I wasn't at a film festival last night, I literally would have went and watched this again last night at the cinema. I didn't have time to go again this morning, but I would have absolutely gone and seen this again just to make sure that I could really understand that. But I think the words of the songs or the names of the songs does remind you of where it was in the movie. It totally does.
It's like a little helpful, roadmap for like, oh yeah, that's the bouncing ball scene. That's the Jaffa cake scene.
Yeah.
So, but then it's also kind of like it's just some comedy. There's a comedic aspect to that being so plain when they would may not be otherwise. You also said, Jim, something I feel like our audience needs to know this because we pulled you onto this show because you're the perfect person to talk about film with. But how many movies have you seen since you saw this film?
Just an estimate. It's probably 90.
90
So
movies, y'all.
yeah, yeah, and that's just I'm probably conservatively saying 90. So because I usually average about 3 a day for the most part, just with what I do and who I volunteer with and what I'm doing on a daily basis. So yeah, I don't normally like to watch TV shows. I just find you turn on a TV show and then you blink and it's next week, and like usually they haven't changed anything in your perspective. Whereas a movie, I can sit down and digest a film in 2 hours, and it tells a complete picture of that story.
Mm.
And to me, that's my jam. It always has been.
Yeah, so you guys covered this movie in episode 270 of your
Okay,
podcast.
that was
And
4 ago. Yeah.
and I remember you really liked it. You gave it a Mondo,
Yep.
which is the highest praise you can give on Film Rage.
That's correct.
Bryce gave it a meh.
Yes.
He liked it, but he also felt, I believe, that if it wasn't like basically like it's
He fell in love with the characters. Like
he fell in love with the characters.
with with Drew and Pew Pew. So like he didn't connect to the story as much, and I think it's because I think who you are as a person and how you connect to film. Sometimes I know Bryce has a lot of filters on sometimes. I mean, we all do, right? When you watch the amount of content, but I think in Bryce's case, he hasn't lived that long journey with somebody. He's got his partner now, but he's been a man of solitude for many years. So I think I think that movie helps. Like I'd be anxious to see, even from your listeners, feedback that they come back with to say like, okay, I've been in a relationship for a long time, and this movie meant a lot to me because of this and this and this. But if you've got, I'm just going to pull an example out. If Bryce has only been in his longest term relationship has been 3 years, right? Like, he's not going to have the same level of mindset that, you know, someone like you, Ryan, who you've been married for X amount of years, you've got kids. It's a whole different perspective, I think. So, you know, it's sometimes hard, especially as a reviewer, to keep that filter out of how you feel about it. Lots of times I'm trying to get more as I continue to do reviews, and I work with a lot of film festivals and do reviews with them, and trying to put that filter on to say, okay, this is why somebody would like this movie, because, you know, because I hate it, it doesn't mean it's a terrible movie for a person who likes this type of movie. So I'm really trying to push myself. It's hard to go there sometimes, because when you see a movie and I get so enraged about how terrible it is that it's hard for me to have that filter. But mark this moment in your calendar. From this moment on, I'm going to try and find somebody who will like a movie, even if I hate it, right? So
it's
I'm
good
really
to
gonna
have
try.
counterpoints, you know, like we've had many episodes of this show where we have, you know, famously disagreed on whether or not something is liked, because as you pointed out, you all come from with your different baggage or lack of baggage or different perspectives. And, you know, that's a worthwhile discussion to have, right? That's why cinema
Yeah.
exists, I guess. Like, everybody's going to come at it differently. But I do
Yeah.
think this film, I didn't think about it at the time, but now that you're talking about it, it hits different when you're at a different place in life, right?
Mm-hmm. Like a 20-year-old who just got out of university and has, you know, just had promiscuity through their last 5 years and doesn't have a life experience may not connect to this movie like someone who's 35 is just about to start having kids, or someone that's 40 who has 2 kids, right? Like, I think that's going to hit everybody in a different way.
You know what I also wonder is that, so obviously, like, Florence and Andrew are both very hot young actors, and I feel like they marketed this to like a fairly young audience. Like, a lot of the promo felt very like intentionally geared towards people that might be following like their careers that are a little bit on the younger end of the spectrum. And I'm wondering if this is one of those movies that people will watch young, process, and then come back to later. Because I know I have movies like that didn't hit me the same way when I watched them initially, but, you know, you go back to them in like 10, 20 years and you feel differently because you are bringing more of yourself to that experience.
Yeah, I would 100%.
I think with this film, like, the plot does feel like a little strange to me. Like, I really enjoyed it, and I think as I was trying to process it afterwards, like, I feel like it is like the sum is greater than its parts, and I think that might be part of like Bryce's like hesitation with it. Like, there are parts of the movie where like I'm kind of surprised that it works the way it does. Like, I think near the end of the film there is, what is the name of the track? I don't want to give too much of a spoiler, but
Is it the ice rink one or the closing?
The final competition.
Well, to me, okay, so my one criticism of the film, and Ryan, you and I talked about this a little bit. Jim, I don't know if you talked about it on your show, but did you talk about any of the, like, the kind of the veracity of the cooking restaurant scenes and scenarios? Did that come up at all?
No, it didn't.
Anybody thinking about that but us?
No.
Have we been like mainlining the bear? I don't know. Like, some of that stuff felt a little bit unrealistic to me, but I don't know if that's how anyone else felt about it. Maybe I was overthinking it. I was like, is that really what would happen?
I don't know. Like, I see, you know, here's the thing I'm going to throw out. I used to watch a lot of cooking shows back in the day when I wasn't watching as many movies. And I'm going to pull out the name, if you're a food, like if you watch Food Network or whatever the hell it's called in the States or in Canada or whatever it's called, Alex Gornishelli. So you know who Alex Gornishelli is?
No.
Sounds familiar.
Okay, so she actually was one of the first American, what is it, that Top Chef one?
Iron
the one
Chef? Is it Iron Chef?
Yes, she was one of the first.
That's where I recognized them.
Yeah, so she's an Iron Chef. And when I think of her and her personality and how she talks about who she is as a chef, and then I watch this movie, I'm like, okay, so this is if Alex Gornishelli fell in love, this is who this person is.
Well, I did actually feel like Florence did a really good job inhabiting the character and sort of the different like attitudes and traits that you would have as sort of like a top shelf or somebody that's like very dedicated to your craft at the expense of maybe other aspects of your personal life. I felt like all of that worked really well. I think that scene at the end that we're talking about, where the final composition plays, was just
Like
a little bit.
The end part of the competition or the competition itself? Like what she
first
did
of all,
after the competition?
I
Without
didn't
spoiling
know
it.
this without spoiling it too much, but like, are these like sort of European or like international like live cooking competitions like spectated that way? Because I felt like there was this big crowd of spectators that were all
like flags and stuff.
International flags, like hell yeah.
Yeah,
there's actually that.
There is actually that. So in Calgary, where I live, there is it's called Southern Alberta Institute of Technology. I wish I had a better memory, but there is a kind of a trades competition that happens internationally, and it was here in Calgary back, I want to say 2 or 3 years ago, and it really was like that. Like it really is that they have these competitions and you're representing your country. It's incredible. Like it's kind of like Eurovision, right? So except for cooking and trades in general. So they have like the cooking is just one trade. There's other trades and it just travels all around the world. Like if you search
like woodworking or like what kind of
anything trades related. Like just search out international trades competition when we get off the pod and check it out because it's kind of cool. Like I think that it's like the Olympics of trade, right? So yeah, it is.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, there was a moment where I was like, they have to be exaggerating this because it felt like the hype in that room was like too exaggerated, but maybe I'm just completely ignorant to trade competitions. We learned something new.
I think it's also because like so much of the movie is about just them, you know? And obviously like she has her job. It's funny because after like the first like 15 minutes, like it doesn't really matter that he has a job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's
like
not even important.
It totally does not like define him. Like it's not important.
I know this is a spoiler, so again, spoilers, tune out. There is a scene where prior to her entering in this competition, she's been kind of secretly training for and putting some of her health journey on hold. They have this conversation at night in their kitchen. Where he's mad at her for hiding this from him. And she ends up sort of saying like, I don't want my daughter to just know me as the mom who died of cancer. I want to do something so that she can remember me that way. That's the one part that actually made me choke a little. Because that felt like...
No, I mean, I think that is a very real thing. It is something not that I have cancer or anything, but you know, like I think legacy is something that we think about when we have kids, like how are my kids going to remember me and things like that. Like I think, and this is a spoiler, but I think the ice skating scene at the end is like a nice way to like show like she had been hiding this from everyone. Right, except her family who was already there. The fact that she had this past life, and then, she takes her daughter ice skating, and then that's kind of how they say goodbye. Like, isn't that the way that her daughter's going to remember her? And not like, oh yeah, mommy was cooking. I don't know what food she was cooking. She was far away.
Like 3, so that kid probably won't remember anything. But that what will be left behind is, I guess, maybe the question of how do you speak about someone after they're gone? What do you have of them besides a collection of photos?
Right. But I think instead of this big competition thing, like the daughter's most likely going to remember, like, oh yeah, I went ice skating with my mommy.
Yeah, which by the way, I have to commend the filmmakers for not doing the like stunt double thing. I was like
making her do like some big fancy routine at the end of the movie.
Yeah, they were like, she's pulling the triple sow cow.
Yeah, exactly. When she hasn't done it for 10, 12 years, like that, first off, that wouldn't ever happen. Like, no, she's not going to do.
I'm Canadian. I've been on the ice. Okay. She
Let
was.
me tell you
we-
something about ice skating. I'm from
We're
Canada.
born on the ice and then we die on the ice. Like it's
Born
like,
flippy.
that's right. And then we die. That's where like we're just there's icebergs everywhere and ice flows around us everywhere as soon as you cross the border. So when people die, we just put them on the ice floe and push them out into the Arctic Ocean.
But yeah, I do like how there's no big ice skating thing at the end, and how after they have like the big climactic fight, that the director trusts you enough to realize that they're adults and they're gonna get over it, instead of having, you know, the big romantic comedy like gesture of like, I understand now. Like it just like moves on, like they're not gonna break up over this fight.
No.
Well, it's just like you pointed out with that there's no deathbed scene, right? This movie doesn't do what you expect it to do. And I think that's what keeps it interesting. That's what keeps like you connected to these moments, because they feel more realistic to life, which is this, you know, big unexpected mystery.
Yeah.
There is no
agree.
Hollywood ending, right? And so I think the embrace of that it was kind of nice to see, and it felt. It's also a very beautiful film. The cinematography is great.
Yeah.
All of the scenes and settings wherever they filmed this, I actually don't specifically know. Maybe you do, Ryan.
I did not look up the locations, but
Jolly old England.
Yeah, but I'm sure it has locations.
The locations that were not used in the Full Monty.
Totally.
None of them.
The pretty parts of England.
Neighborhoods. This working class neighborhoods is not there. Nothing looks like coal smoke. No, it's just beautiful. It's...
That is one of the things I like a lot on IMDb. Is it will sometimes tell you a lot of the physical locations, but
right.
In this case, it just says London, UK. So
yeah, even the car park is way nicer than a lot of other movies about England.
But I noticed that too. I'm like, wow, that lighting in this car park is...
Man, this must be the fanciest hospital.
Yeah.
You know, it's socialized Medicare over there. Just like in Canada. That's why.
It's the Cedar Sinai of London.
That's right.
I gotta get me some of that socialized medicine and fresh farmers market air.
Yeah.
Suck it up.
So there's a couple of needle drops in this film. I know that most of the music is Bryce Dessner's score, but like there's the XX I Dare You and a couple of other songs. They're very well placed, but they're not like Murder on the Dance Floor from Saltburn, where it's like it's gonna bring anything back. But you know, it's tastefully done. Needle drops are tastefully done in this film.
Yeah, I think it fits.
But at least one is diegetic, right?
I believe so. I know that the XX is to like a montage of them like just hanging out.
Yeah. It's funny because when I might have been saying this to Ryan before we started, but trying to find exactly what songs are on there online is not easy to do. And but if you search on Spotify, they've got a playlist which basically has, you know, the score and a few of the songs, and then it adds all these other ones. I'm like, I don't remember this from the movie. And it just went, oh, you know, if you like these ones, you're going to like this. I'm like, Spotify, don't do that to me. I don't.
Yeah, Spotify users are giving me like mad Mandela effect. Like, because they do that thing where it's like, we're just like going to fill in like a soundtrack for you, like a fantasy soundtrack. And I'm like,
this sounds kind of like the song that is not available on Spotify. So we're just going to jam this in.
We're just going to pretend. Nobody's going to notice.
Yeah. You'll like it. Yeah,
you can't get it anyways.
Not Bauhaus. Bahamas is on there. This was like, which kind of makes sense. It kind of fits. But I was just like, no, that song was not in this movie. I know that.
But somebody was like, close enough.
Yeah, close enough. Fits the vibe, maybe.
It's the vibe, maybe. It's like, this is also like a very like a millennial coded sort of film musically. I think
same soundtrack supervisors Love Actually.
What?
Same soundtrack supervisors Love Actually.
Is it?
What?
Whoa.
Yeah. I mean, he's done like a billion movies, but
okay, it was like, but that. Wait, what? Okay.
So that's
I think
not
he's also doing
L'Oreal
like
at all.
Paddington in Peru.
Okay, well, he's just British then. Is
Yeah,
what
he's
you're
just
telling
British.
me. He's just
Yes,
hanging
yes.
out. Okay,
He does
he's at
all of
Benedict
the
Cumberbatch's
movies.
house,
That's right. He's at Benny's
cottage,
house.
estate. You know what's funny? This is the second like distinctly British film that we've talked to you about, Jim.
What is that all about? Is that going to be
What's
our
that
thing?
about? And maybe that's our thing.
Maybe. I'm trying to think if there was anybody in the David Byrne film that was British. I don't think there was. So that's weird.
I sure hope not, because that movie was about Texas.
I was
Yeah.
like, I wasn't there for that. So technically, for me,
It doesn't count.
Tom
There you
Holland
go. It
was in
doesn't
it.
count. Yeah, I wish Tom Holland was in it. Sorry, American Tom Holland was in it.
Yeah. No, it's funny because I remember texting my friend who was a big Andrew Garfield fan. I said, I just saw We Live in Time. They actually let Andrew be British. And she texted back, that's a rarity.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things, right? Like there's only so much content that can be I don't know. I hope this doesn't sound anti-American because I'm not
oh,
that
go for it.
anti-American. I'm not that anti-American.
I kind of am,
but-
and I'm American.
Kick us while
Oh,
we're
okay.
down.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, kick us right in the Eagles' nuts.
But it's like there's not a lot of British movies that make it big over the pond. It's like when you'll talk to a lot of, I want to say the Hollywood watching ilk is what I want to call it.
The elk.
Where they can't wait till the next Hollywood movie comes out, where it's like you don't have to have subtitles to watch it, right? I think I'll hear some people talk that are on the American side of things, and they'll be like, I couldn't understand what they were talking about, and they just had a slightly British accent. And, oh, this movie has subtitles, so I have no interest to watch it. And I'm just like, you're missing possibly some of the greatest films ever made, and you're not watching it because it wasn't made with a California, or in most cases, a Canadian accent, because we're the most generic sounding American.
This is an acting showcase, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Like, such a good. They're both so good. You know, like everything in this film is great. The cinematography is beautiful. The direction was great.
Yeah.
You know, for whatever qualms I have about like the storyline or script, like it's just so enjoyable on every level where it doesn't really matter. It's just such a nice movie. I think I said it's an extremely rewatchable movie for a movie that's kind of known to be a sad movie.
Yeah. Yeah. Well put.
So, We Live in Time. Digitally, the soundtrack is out now. The physical is out on A24. End of December, I believe the 28th, they said it is going to come out. You can pre-order now.
We are not paid shills for A24. We just went to a free movie, and that doesn't count.
No, we actually ended up at a loss because we bought bad mall food afterwards.
That's true. We did buy mall food. We also paid for 2 MacGuffins bar drinks at the AMC.
Nice.
In accordance with tradition.
Yeah. So let's get to our odds and ends before we end the episode. So this is a new feature of the podcast where we talk about maybe stories or things we missed in previous episodes. So I have a little tidbit from Punch Drunk Love, which we did with Peta Beta from Middle Class Film Class. So the kind of visual transitions, the Technicolor transitions in the movie, I said they were done by Jeremy Blake. He was an LA artist. The reason I know so much about Jeremy Blake, or that he did that specifically, because 2002 was a very big year for Jeremy Blake. He also did the artwork for Beck's Sea Change album. And I know that because I saw Beck on tour that year. It was Beck and the Flaming Lips, where the Flaming Lips played as Beck's backing band.
What?
And I think Beck gave the Jeremy Blake a shout out during that show. So I was like, oh yeah, like it's the Punch Drunk Love guy. Like he's like a big artist in LA. So I forgot to tell that during our Punch Drunk Love episode, and I thought I would tell that story now.
I'm so jealous that you got to see Beck during like the sad Beck era.
But it was not the sad Beck era.
You didn't do
'Cause he-
Seasons? It's not the sad Beck era?
Well, so I think he did like a mini tour where it was just sad Beck songs. And then he did this tour where the Flaming Lips were his backing band, where like he would start the show doing a couple of his Sea Change sad Beck songs, and then he would then he started playing the Golden Age, and then all of a sudden Wayne Coyne runs and like just grabs this curtain, and like all of a sudden there's a whole band and it's the Flaming Lips behind Beck. And Wayne was basically like the Flava Flav to Beck's Chuck D for the show.
Oh, wow.
Like he had like these flashlight gun things that like when Beck would start dancing, he'd like shine Beck with these flashlights. And during Where It's At, he had like a megaphone and he would just scream Where It's At.
That would have been fun. Did he do it inside the giant bubble?
Yeah.
This is right before the hamster ball.
So before the
okay.
hamster bubble? Wow.
Oh man, that would have been a show.
We do live in time.
It was weird because it was like Beck and the Flaming Lips, and then at one point Beck was like, oh, you know, the musical director who kind of helped put this together, he's from this band Gegita. His name's Greg Kurstin.
What?
So like super producer extraordinaire Greg Kurstin was like just playing keyboards and helping put things together. But it was a great show. It was one of my favorite shows because you know, you had sad Beck and fun Beck, but then fun Beck on steroids because he was with the Flaming Lips.
I have to tell you a quick story that first Gegita album is one of my family's favorite albums. We would listen to it all the time. So my daughters both love that album. They still listen to it to this day.
And who knew that Gegita guy would become like the biggest producer?
Yeah,
on the
I
planet,
know. I
pretty
can't wait
much.
for his Lego movie of his bio.
Did you see that movie, by the way, Jen?
Of course I did.
Of course you did. What did you think of it? I'm curious.
I loved it. I thought it was
Yeah,
fantastic.
I loved it too. I thought it was really creative, and I, you know, am not somebody that's like heavily interested in like Pharrell or the Neptunes, but I thought it was really well done.
So thank you, Jim, for coming back on the podcast.
Thank you, Jim. We love having you. You're so fun to talk to.
I love being here. I wish I could just live in time with you two.
But nobody dies.
Yeah, but nobody
nobody
dies and has
Where
cancer.
none of us die of cancer.
Thank you for being on one of our few episodes where you don't get to choose the soundtrack.
Yeah, thank you for being game for that. Us forcing something upon you.
Anytime you want to force me to do things, I'm always into being a bottom. Don't worry about it.
Just gonna puppet you around, Jim.
So, Jim, where can people listen to Film Rage?
Well, you go on the Google thing and you search Film Rage Podcast, and you will find us on filmrageyyc.com and everywhere on the socials at Film Rage YYC.
And I believe new episodes on Wednesdays.
Yes, Wednesday nights late. I don't know why Bryce can't get his shit together and release them earlier, but apparently they come out like later and later every week, so I don't know. So basically Thursday morning on your way to work.
If you want to listen to their great episode talking about We Live in Time, that is episode 270, but listen to all of them.
Thanks, buddy.
You're welcome. You can find us at SoundtrackCast on Instagram and Twitter, and we have new episodes that usually come out on Monday, but we're switching hosts right now, so I don't know if that's going to happen for this upcoming week, but you know how to find us. We're on all your favorite podcasting services, just like
And we're on
Film
Blue
Rage.
Sky, if anyone cares or is there.
Yeah, we're on Blue Sky at soundtrackcast.bsky.whatever.
Oh, this is the new latest and greatest thing, isn't it? The
Yeah,
Blue
you got to
Sky
jump
world.
over.
I don't know. I don't understand it. I got
I don't know.
17 socials I got to follow.
Well, Twitter's going away eventually. So, yeah, you can find us on socials. We also have a Patreon, patreon.com/soundtrackyourlife, where you can get bonus episodes. We're going to have our year-end music episode coming out before the end of the year, where we talk about our favorite albums of the year. I was going to suggest we record it like a week ago, Nicole, and then I'm glad I didn't because the Kendrick Lamar album just came out yesterday. So
Well, so you may have to change your ranking around.
it's number one is Kendrick.
It's not the Father John Misty album that released on the same day. Those memes were great.
I mean, Father John Misty has already conceded that it's probably Kendrick at number one. I heard it's great, though. I heard the Father John Misty is really good.
Yeah, I haven't heard it yet, but it's on the list of things to do over break.
Thank you, Jim, for coming on the podcast and talking about this great movie.
Love it. Thanks, guys.
And we will probably have you on again because we love having you on.